Hi, everyone, and welcome to our Chefs for Chefs event today. So good to see your faces here, and thank you so much for joining. Please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat, where you're joining us from, or, share some of your favorite things to cook in the kitchen. And whether you're cooking along or just sitting back and enjoying the show, just go ahead and raise your hand and unmute yourself if you feel like doing so at any point today. And of course, you have the chat box. So if you want to ask any questions or chat amongst yourselves, go for it. So let me introduce myself to those of you who don't already know me. I am Sylvia Ng, and I am a registered dietitian nutritionist. I created Chefs for Chefs as one of my passion projects. And the CHEFS stands for Charities, Helping Everyone for Seva, which means selfless service. So I've been pairing up with my talented chef friends to offer virtual cooking classes to all of you so that we can raise money and raise awareness for charities and organizations around the world. So the last event, we were cooking with Chef Sudesh Budram, and he was making a pan-seared snapper with a seasonal succotash in honor of his mother-in-law who passed away with Alzheimer's. So his charity of choice this month is the Alzheimer's Association, which is the leading organization in research, healthcare, and advocacy initiatives. And as most of you probably already know, Alzheimer's is a type of progressive neurologic disorder that leads to dementia, which affects memory and brain function, and it could lead to confusion and just losing the ability to carry out basically everyday things. So right now there are over 6.5 million Americans living with Alzheimer's, and almost 2/3 are women, by the way. And there are over 11 million caretakers out there, with over 80% of them being family, friends, or other unpaid caregivers, which can really be a lot of responsibility. And it can be really expensive and become a really emotional experience for people caring for loved ones with Alzheimer's. So one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about cooking for this cause in particular is that my own grandmother, my mom's mom, also passed away years ago with Alzheimer's. And my brother and I grew up with her for the first, 17 years of my life, and she helped raise us as kids. And so as a kid, I didn't really understand what was going on, or, why grandma acted the way she did sometimes, or, she'd forget something after, 2 minutes of telling her. But, we all loved her. So this is really an important one for me too. So today I am cooking a quick and healthy brain boosting Buddha bowl, which you could make for brunch, lunch, or dinner tonight. And this recipe is simple. You can make it with whatever you like so that it's nourishing for your mind's memory and mood. And if you don't have any questions to start with, let's get the cooking started. So first I am going to get my quinoa on first. So I'm going to put about a cup of quinoa into the pot. And then sometimes I kind of skip this next step, which is to rinse it with water, but I'll do it today just because, we're live and all. So basically I'm just gonna put a little bit of cold water into the pot, and then I'm gonna take a little bit of a strainer and then just strain out the quinoa so that it doesn't all go down the drain. But a lot of people say that they rinse their quinoa because it can have a little bit of a bitterness to it, but I honestly haven't really noticed that much of a difference. So that's why sometimes I kind of skip this step. So now I'm just going to measure out about 3 cups of water. And you can eyeball this usually, but again, since I'm doing this live, I'm going to measure it out. And you can also use vegetable stock or chicken stock here if you want to add a little bit more flavor to your quinoa. But if you are going to use your quinoa for anything except for something savory, then I would recommend just using plain water here instead. Let me get this going. And what I like to mention is that whenever I'm cooking quinoa, I always like to use a glass top, because then I can see whether or not my quinoa is going to need more water as it's cooking without having to open up the lid. That way the pressure that builds inside of the pot stays within the pot. And I'm just going to bring it up to a boil. And when it comes to a boil, I'm going to lower the heat down to a simmer. So next, I'm going to get my walnuts here toasted in the oven. Generally, when you toast them, they can get just a little bit bitter, but I actually like that. Some people don't, but I prefer them to be toasted, because what it does is kind of activate this enzyme, I guess, into the walnuts so that it makes it easier for you to digest. So what I'm gonna do is just throw the oven on 325. I'm gonna do about 8 minutes first and then see how it goes. It might need another few minutes or it might not. So next I am going to get my tofu started. I'm gonna just cook it, not so much that it gets like really crispy on top, but just enough so that the tofu is, you know, kind of gets cooked through and, you know, warms up so that when you add it to your Buddha bowl, it's all nice and hot. So what I'm gonna do first, oh, and I should mention that when I am cooking with tofu, I usually buy it in like the 8-ounce or 1 pound blocks. So I'm gonna take this block, and you could dry it off or, you know, dabble some paper towels on it. But again, I just like to do what's easiest, which is to just throw it right into the pan. So I'm gonna get the pan hot. I'm gonna put it on about medium to medium high heat. And then let me throw this other camera into the spotlight for you. All right, so hopefully you can see me here. So I'm gonna take the block of tofu and then I'm just gonna cube it. You could absolutely do just like slices of it. But for this dish, I'm just gonna cut it into cubes. It's a lot faster that way. You can see it's really easy to slice through the tofu. This is the extra firm one, by the way. So now I just kind of have little cubes of tofu here. And then I'm just gonna add a little bit of avocado oil to the pan. Just gonna spray a little bit. And here's a little bit of a trick. If you don't want the spray to go all over the place, just put it over your sink or your trash can or whatever, and then spray it. That way you don't get, you know, oil sprayed all over the place. There you go. And like we mentioned in our last episode, the avocado oil, I prefer to use that when we're cooking with high to medium high heat, just because it has this higher smoke point. So it's able to cook better than using something like olive oil for this. So I'm gonna let this heat up for a little bit before I add in my tofu. And then, like I mentioned, I don't even know if I mentioned this or not, but when I store my tofu, I usually put it in some cold water so that way it doesn't get all dried out in the fridge. Great. So now, and you know, I love using tofu because it basically comes from these little soybeans here and it magically turns into tofu, right? But it's a great plant protein. And you know, it's great if you're trying to add more of a plant-based diet. You know, it's got a lot less of the saturated fats. And you know what? It just goes with so many things. Like it's very versatile. It picks up the flavors of a lot of other things that you're cooking with. So if you wanted to marinate the tofu instead, you can do that. I'm simply just gonna add a little bit of salt and pepper to the tofu to season it. You could also add a little bit of, you know, garlic powder. Yeah, I will do that as well. If you wanted to cook this in some sesame oil, you can do that as well. Maybe I will add a little bit of garlic powder here. Add a little bit of flavor to it. And then what I'm gonna do, like when I cook anything that splatters in the pan, I'll just put the cover on, but I'll vent it so that it doesn't steam in the pan, but it will, but it'll still cook all the way through. So something like that. Right. And then next I have my kale. I've got this beautiful head of kale over here. I've already rinsed my kale and let it dry a little bit. So this is just like the curly green leaf kale. You can also get the purple ones, or if you like the dinosaur kale, you can use that as well. And when I am working with kids, I like to call it dinosaur kale, because then, you know, the kids are like, oh, wow, it's like a dinosaur. Like, you know, it's more playful that way. But the dinosaur kale is also known as lacinato kale or Italian kale. And to remove the rib of the kale, I just hold it from the top, and then I just push all the leaves down so that it's easy to remove, just like that. And then I'm left with the stems. So you could always throw this into a stock, or you can always throw it into the compost. And what I'm gonna do here, and this is a fun thing for kids too, is just rip this up and put it in a bowl. Easy enough to do. You don't even need a knife. So if you do have really young kids, this is a fun one for them to do. I'm gonna keep this here. I'm gonna keep it on the side for right now, but later on, I'm just gonna put a little bit of olive oil in it, and I'm gonna massage it. And what the massaging does is actually break up some of these fibrous bits of the kale, and it also just adds a little bit of a nice little flavor to it. And that's it. Probably have about 2 cups of kale here, so I'm gonna do about half of the recipe. So if you're gonna cook for 4, I would definitely use about 4 cups of kale. And so that turns out to about a cup each. So I'm just gonna keep it in this bowl for right now. And then next, I'm actually gonna get going on my dressing. And the quinoa is boiling, so I'm just gonna lower that to a medium heat. I don't know if you can hear the tofu, but it is sizzling already. And to make this dressing, I've only made a version of this dressing. I haven't actually made this exact dressing before, but what it is basically an herb and garlic dressing. So I'm gonna take a can of chickpeas or garbanzo beans, and I'm gonna strain that liquid right into the blender. And so talk about no waste. I'm using, you know, everything from the chickpeas in the salad to what they call the aquafaba in the can. And what it is, it's basically just water with a little bit of salt, and then that starchiness that comes out of the beans kind of makes the liquid a little bit thicker. So, so if you can, just try to find the cans with lower sodium or reduced sodium, if you can find them. That way you can control the saltiness of your dressing. And I'd like to just give this tip, because with cans, I have a big thing about cans. First of all, always rinse the tops of them, because they always have some sort of dust collected on top, or, you know, something else that you're not really sure that's there. And then when I open them, I don't open them all the way, because when I throw it into the recycling bin, I can actually just flip the lid into the can. Working in restaurants, I've definitely seen an accident before where the lid was tossed into the bin and it cut right through the garbage bin and ended up slicing somebody's knee right open. So that's definitely a good safety tip that I like to tell people. And I'm pretty adamant about, you know, food safety in the kitchen, because nobody wants to get hurt when they're cooking, right? So here we have the chickpeas all drained. I'll just keep them in a container for right now. And I think I heard my walnuts going off in the kitchen, in the oven. So I will go check those to see how they're doing. And so with any nuts, you're gonna want to toast them slightly, again, so that the essential oils from the nuts actually release and get a little bit more flavorful. And then also, when you toast them in the oven, they just get a little bit crispier and a little bit crunchier, because when you buy them already roasted in the store, you don't know how long they've been sitting there on the shelf. So this just kind of gives them a little bit of a crispness to it. So this is about a cup of walnuts, and the 8 minutes was perfect on at 325 degrees Fahrenheit. And so I'm just gonna set this aside to cool. And it smells delicious. I don't know if you ever toast your nuts in the oven, toast your nuts in the oven, but they just release those essential oils and they just smell up the whole kitchen, and it just got this really great smell to it. Let's see how we're doing here. So yeah, for the dressing, I have the aquafaba, which a lot of people who are eating a plant-based diet, they like to use as some sort of egg replacement, especially if you whip it up. It can actually turn into like a foam, like a meringue, kind of like an egg white. But for this, we're actually gonna use this into the dressing. So I also have some parsley here. And then I also have some cilantro, and I just give them a quick rinse. This is about a half a bunch each. And I do about equal parts cilantro and parsley. And you do want to give them a quick rinse just because a lot of the times they have a little bit of dirt on them. And then, you don't want to put it into your dressing and then have this like grittiness in your mouth. So for this, you don't even really have to chop up anything. I just kind of chop up some of the stems because they can be a little bit difficult to break down into the blender if you don't have a really strong one. And the herbs are they're super powerful, nutritious foods to add into anything, which is why I love this dressing, because you can, put it on salads. I've put it on eggs before, or if you have some roast chicken or roast potatoes, it actually goes really great. It's kind of like a cross between, I would say, a chimichurri and like a gremolata, something like that. But I'm kind of just doing my own twist on it. So next I'm gonna add some lemon juice. I have about a half a lemon here that I've already cut up. I might need more, but I'll just take these little lemon pieces and squeeze it right into the dressing. And I just have a strainer over it just to catch any of the seeds. I think I will need more than just this. I'm not using this hand because actually I have a cut on my hand. So you know what that feels like when you have a cut on your hand and you try to squeeze lemon juice. It's pretty painful. All right, so this was actually about a quarter of a lemon. So I'm gonna just take this lemon, just give it a quick roll. And what you could do before you actually start juicing it is take a zester and just kind of zest the lemon so that you can add a little bit of that lemon zest on top of your Buddha bowl. And I'm just taking a microplane to it. And it has all of those amazing essential oils in there so that when you do zest it, it just smells so fresh. So imagine sprinkling this on top of your salad or your Buddha bowl, and you can add a really light spring kind of touch to it. All right, so after I zest it, I'm just going to slice it into quarters. And just juice it right into my dressing. So the contents of this dressing is basically the liquid from the chickpeas, some lemon juice, equal parts cilantro and parsley. And then I'm gonna add probably a tablespoon or two of extra virgin olive oil. And then I'm gonna add just a little bit of salt, red pepper flakes, and some fresh garlic cloves. For me, sometimes it's just like all about the garlic. And the lemon juice has, as you know, has so much vitamin C in it, and that's such a powerful antioxidant. So it's definitely good, not just for your brain, but for your heart and just for anything. It fights those free radicals and prevents prevents oxidative stress, which is a lot of the times can be associated with your brain health. So I just turned up the heat on the tofu just to get a little bit more of a sear on it. Yeah, that's looking really good. The quinoa is coming along great. Right. Next, I'm just going to add a little bit of salt to this. I would say I'm going to add about a half teaspoon of salt. Again, I could measure it, but I'm just going to taste it and adjust it anyway. So I just have to make sure I don't over salt it first. And, you know, like I said, that's going to depend on what type of canned garbanzo beans you get. So that's where your kitchen confidence comes in. You kind of just have to rely on your intuition and see how much, you know, you think you'll need. That was about 2 tablespoons of olive oil I added in there. I can always add more, just like the salt. And then I'm gonna take some garlic cloves. I think for this, I'm gonna take about 3 or 4 garlic cloves, maybe 3 big ones. If you only have the small garlic cloves, maybe put in 4. And skin always gets all over the place, right? It gets so sticky. Here I have about 4 garlic cloves. So I'm just gonna face the rounded part towards me, give it a little bit of a smash. Sometimes when I do this, I'm just like, whoa, stronger than I think, right? And then I'm just gonna cut off the ends, and then I'm gonna peel the garlic clove away. Usually by cutting off the end, it kind of makes it easier to remove the skin from the whole thing. And then just dump that right in there into the blender. Oh, I'm feeling that lemon juice on my cut right now. It's pretty powerful there. It was not a kitchen accident, I will tell you that. And there you go. I'm gonna clear off the garlic peels now. Throw that into my compost. I actually just checked on my compost in the backyard the other day, and it's looking pretty good. It's smelling like, you know, dirt, which is what it's supposed to smell like. But I have one of those tumblers, and I'm just waiting for that compost to finish so I can add it to my spring prep in the garden. Just rinse this really quickly. There's garlic peels all over. And my knife gets a little bit sticky too. Great. And then next we are going to cut a little bit of red onion. So I did wash it already. Even though we take the peel off, I still like to wash it because it is going on your cutting board. And what I like to do with onions is, you know, me and my batch prepping and batch cooking, I always have some kind of lying around. So sometimes I like to prep, you know, 1 or 2 onions at a time. That way, as my week goes on, I don't have to take the time to, you know, prep them all on the spot. Yeah, I think when Sudesh was cooking, he was like, well, chopping an onion is not the sexiest thing, but you know, when you think about it, you know, you're kind of peeling back the layers and stuff. It could be if you wanted it to be, right? Because now you have a naked onion here. So you can use any color onion. You know, I'm just using purple because I like purple onion in my salad, because when I eat the raw onion, I feel like I like it just a little bit better than the yellow and the white onions, but you can use whatever you have in your fridge, basically. And so here, I'm just gonna probably only need 1/4 of an onion for today's bootable. So what I do is I slice along the lines of the onion, and I use my left hand as a guide here, just so I don't slice off any of my fingers. And then I just turn it on the side, and I basically have a diced onion. I think that is plenty for just the two of us. Onion breath is it's a thing, so you probably don't need to cut that much. But like I said, even if I over prep or I overcut some onion, I can just use it in my cooking for the rest of the week. There you go. I do the same with my bell peppers, as you can see. And you can also add it to this bowl if you want, but I just like to get it all prepped into a container so that way tomorrow or the next day if I'm cooking something for lunch or dinner, it's kind of like already done for me. So I'll add this to the side. And what I did here is I actually just used frozen corn and frozen edamame, and I defrosted it overnight. I just moved it literally from the freezer, from the fridge, and I didn't even have to think about running it under, cold water or hot water or, whatever. And like what Sadesh was saying last time, it's like, I actually really like using frozen vegetables for things, especially when they're not in season. So that way you can have them all year round. There you go. Let me check on my tofu here. It is getting a little bit browned, so I'm just going to take this. I'm going to flip them on the other side. I'm going to grab a pair of chopsticks here. I'm going to put the tofu on their sides. And you'll always notice where the hot spots are in your pan. Usually for my stove, it's the middle of the pan that gets the hottest, whereas everything on the outside doesn't cook quite as quickly. So sometimes I'll just move all the ones in the middle, I'll move them to the outside. And then I'll move the ones from the outside into the middle. So it doesn't have to be perfect, but So if I were to have covered this pan completely with a cover, it would have just steamed and it wouldn't have given me this nice golden color as much. You could also just roast the tofu in the oven, but I like keeping an eye on mine just because sometimes it doesn't get as crispy in the oven. There you go. And I have it on a medium high heat still. On the side, my quinoa is looking pretty good there. And I love cooking quinoa because I can cook one pot of it and it'll last me like all week, and you don't really have to do much. You kind of just put it in a pot and let it go. You don't really have to like keep an eye on it so much. All right, so while those are still going, I'm gonna finish up my dressing here. I'm gonna hold off on the chili flakes for a second, but I'm just gonna blend this. And Zoom's usually pretty good about quieting the sound for me. So, but if it's not, just, close your ears. So I'm gonna start on the lowest speed, and then I'm gonna slowly increase it. You know what, maybe I'll move this over here so you can see it a little bit better. Maybe not. I think my wires are all stuck, so hopefully you can see that. You can see it's actually starting to get a bit frothy. So when people are using the aquafaba to make a meringue, that's how, basically make a meringue, you just whisk it. And it's kind of higher. Okay, just gonna add a little bit of the chili flakes to it. I would say just 2 pinches or so. It's kind of up to you how spicy you'd like it. Give it a taste. It's pretty good. I would actually add a little bit more water to it. Yeah, I'm gonna add a little bit of water to it. Where's my water? Here's my water. It's a little bit more salt than I even would have wanted, which is why you kind of have to gauge it first before adding in more salt. Maybe just a dash of the olive oil. And then I'm gonna blend it really quickly. There you go. Give it another taste. It should be good. Yeah, that's pretty good. You can see from here, it's a little bit more on the liquidy side, but that's kind of okay. You know, because it is like a dressing, almost kind of like a, I don't want to use the term green goddess dressing because I actually don't know what's in that exactly, but this is kind of like my own version of my garlicky green dressing, if you will. So great, that was simple enough, right? Now I can put this to the side. And then, let's see, how long does it take for your compost to become dirt? Oh, that's a good question. It depends how hot it gets, because the hotter it gets, the faster it turns back into compost, if that makes sense. You know, here we have a long winter, so it's not really breaking down as much. But when the temperatures get high enough, that compost kind of breaks down faster. So this compost is something that I started last fall. Maybe even, yeah, I started it last fall, and I'm hoping that it'll be done by the start of this summer. So I would say like, you know, a good 8 months or so, at least where I live. But that's a great question. You know, if you wanted to do the worm composting, I think that can actually take place a little bit faster, and the worms will basically eat all the food scraps and then they'll poop out all the dirt. So it's super healthy, rich soil. If you know, it's organic, so that whatever whatever food scraps you had, turn it back into soil so that it'll put the nutrients back into your garden. So yeah, I didn't know how it would take that long. Yeah, there are some other composts out there. I've seen this one. It's actually a tabletop compost, and you can put all of your food scraps in it and it'll turn it into compost in like within a matter of hours. But I think it's because it's constantly heated to like 100 something degrees. Typically you want it to be over 100, and don't quote me on this, but 160 degrees or so, to make sure that all of the bacteria that could be in there kind of dies off, and you're just left with soil, basically. Thanks for the question. Yeah. So my quinoa is basically done. I saw that all of the little tails have released and all of the water has practically been absorbed. So I'm gonna hold it up to the light, and I don't know if you can see that. You see that there is still some liquid in there. And what I do at this point is I just turn it off, because the quinoa will keep cooking and it'll keep absorbing that water. So if you were to leave it on the stove with the heat on, there's a higher chance of it getting stuck and burnt to the bottom of the pot. So I just say the last, if you think it needs a few more minutes of cooking, it doesn't. Just turn it off and then let it finish cooking on its own there. Okay, and our tofu, our tofu is looking really good here too. Getting nice and crispy on all sides. You can see all the brown goodness over here. So I'm just gonna keep flipping them on their sides. Might even just lower the heat a little bit. so that way they don't burn, but they'll just get a nice little crispy brownness to it. Some people are intimidated by tofu, but I think it's like one of the easiest things you could cook, really. You don't even have to cook it. Sometimes I just eat it raw in my salads, or last night I put it into my soup. And I do want to mention, because it does come from soybeans, I do try to buy the ones that are organic, just because otherwise, if they're not organic, then they're probably genetically modified. And you know, some studies have shown that it's very difficult, or people have problems digesting that properly, or there's certain chemicals that are released. So, you know, it's not something that I want to take a chance on. I'd rather just buy, you know, spend the extra 20 cents or whatever it is to buy the organic ones. Okay, everything is looking great here. What else do I have? I've got the blueberries here. I just wanted to mention that, you know, I have the frozen ones that I defrosted, and I do like to use those for my salads, because when they defrost, they have this little bit of like blueberry juice that comes along with it. But you could totally just use the fresh blueberries too. You know, of course, buy them when they're in season. But you know, these days you could probably find blueberries all year round. So it's kind of up to you which one you prefer. But for today, I'm just gonna use the frozen ones because I like that little added berry juice that I'm gonna put into my salad bowl. Great. And then what I'm gonna do is actually throw in some of the corn in with the tofu here, just to give it warm it up a little bit, and then give it a little bit of that like brown color. I don't know about everyone else, but when I see corn in the stores, like the husks and everything, I feel like that just reminds me of summertime. Just, you know, it's just something about it's like, oh, hey, there's corn in the store. It's finally summertime, and you know, time to go grilling or celebrate the warm weather and go get a tan. Anyway, I like that feeling. So when I see corn in the store, that always gives me a little bit of a joyous feeling inside. And if you don't want to do tofu, you could totally use like hard-boiled eggs. So last night I actually did a bunch of them, again, so I can batch cook for the week. And then I just did a bunch of hard-boiled eggs, and then I stored them in some cold water. So that way I can just have it for breakfast, or I can add it into my lunch. And what I like to do here, because I like beets, I'll take the juice from the beets and I'll kind of, I'll kind of submerge it into I'll submerge one of those eggs into the beet juice, and it gives it this really cool, vibrant color. So that when I'll cut this one open later, but it just gives this really great, like reddish, purplish color that I love for the eggs. And, you know, beet juice does have its own nutrients as well in it. So instead of throwing out that beet juice, you could drink it or you could put it into a smoothie. But actually, I like naturally coloring my eggs. So, you know, if you're someone who celebrates Easter and you don't want to use those chemical dyes, you can just use the beet juice to naturally color your eggs. You know, you can also use like turmeric for yellow, you know, leafy greens for like herbs for a greenish color. So that's something fun to do. So let me actually start putting together our Buddha bowl, because I think we have all of our ingredients ready to go. And you know what, I do just want to mention that like the eggs, they also have something called choline in them. And I believe soybeans and quinoa, they all have something called choline. And our brains actually need something called acetylcholine or phosphatidylcholine. And so these are like the precursors for that, so that our brain can you know, have all those neurotransmitters working and, you know, firing at all of our, you know, through all of our synapses and all that stuff. So, you know, whether you decide to use eggs or whether you decide to use tofu, you know, it's both great for your brain health. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually take my kale here, and this is for 2. So I'm just going to take half of this since I'm just making 1 bowl for myself right now. I'm going to drizzle a little bit of olive oil in here. Or maybe if I tilt this, you can see it a little better. Maybe not. But anyway, take just a little drizzle of olive oil. And if you don't like getting your hands dirty, sorry. This part you kind of have to do with your hands. And you know what? If you have dry skin, this is actually good for your skin because the olive oil will help moisturize your skin. So I'm going to do this. And like I said, this helps break down some of the fibers in the kale so that it's easier to chew. And it also just gives it a little bit of that like extra like yummy extra virgin olive oil flavor. All right. And then next, so this, maybe I'll do this and see a little bit better. Hopefully it doesn't fall. Next, I'm gonna grab my quinoa. Oh, that looks great. And you know, I'm a big fan of quinoa breakfasts. So if you just have like a big old pot of quinoa like this, you can turn it into something sweet. You can turn it into something savory for breakfast. Kind of like a fried rice, actually. I'm gonna sprinkle this quinoa all over. That looks great. You could season it with a little bit of salt, but like I said, if you wanted to use it for something sweet, you might not want that salt in there. And then next, I'm going to, let's see, I'm gonna grab some of my onions here. I'm just gonna try to make this sort of pretty here. My onions, I'm gonna grab my, my chickpeas over here. And this will be fun if you just had everything out in different plates or bowls, and then everybody in your family can go and make their own bowl. And I'm gonna grab my blueberries and just put them here. There we go. And the blueberries are really high in antioxidants. You know, it's like that bluish purple color that you have. That's of course great for your brain. It's great for inflammation. It's great for just your overall health, you know. And then next I have my corn here. It's still hot. Did this to get a little bit of that. Here. Take some of the corn, put that next to the blueberries. You know, and so a lot of times when I'm making my food, I try to make them as colorful as possible just because they all have different phytonutrients and antioxidants that are going to be great for your health. You know, all the different colors mean they have different health properties that your body is going to be like, yay, thank you. And next I have my edamame. I'm going to put that in here as well. Put that next to the corn. And you know, when you go out to eat and you buy one of these like grain bowls or greens and grain bowls or a Buddha bowl, whatever you want to call it, you know, they can cost you, you know, $10 to $15 at least. Whereas if you make it at home, you could probably make like a whole bunch of these bowls for, you know, the $10 to $15. So I'm always a big fan of saving money there if possible. Let me grab my walnuts over here. And the walnuts are also really great for your brain because it has these omega-3 fatty acids that your brain needs. And a lot of the times in the standard American diet, which I think ironically, or maybe not so ironically, has the acronym SAD, we have this disproportional amount of fat intake, where it's not the amount of fat, it's usually the types of fat. And so the omega-3 fatty acids are more anti-inflammatory, whereas a lot of the oils that you might see that are processed, like the canola oil or the vegetable oils, they're much more higher in omega-6 fatty acids. And so our proportion of those omega-3 to omega-6 fatty acids are out of whack, basically. And so we need a lot more omega-3s in our diet for that anti-inflammatory effect to take place. And plus, when you look at the walnuts, they kind of look like a brain, right? So I know, some people who are into functional foods and stuff like that, they're like, well, if it looks like a brain, it's probably good for your brain. I don't know how true that is, but it works here, right? So I'm going to take one of these avocados. You always have a backup avocado in case one of them doesn't look so great. And just going to slice this in half. Give it a good twist. Yay, I'm always excited when I get good avocados. And then I'm just going to slice this. So this might look kind of funny at the angle, but I'm just trying to show it to the camera. Just going to slice these on a diagonal. Then I'm going to take my spoon and scoop it out. Maybe I'll do it the other way. Just kind of, here we go. And the next I'm going to take some tofu. I'm going to put them right in the center of the bowl. So I'll probably just take like, I don't know why I'm doing one by one, but let me do this here. Probably just take about 2 ounces or so of tofu for this. And it looks really great. Okay. And then I have my dressing on the side. I probably won't dress it now, but basically we've got this green dressing here. And let me pour it into a container. This one looks nice. Oh, it smells so good. That fresh garlic really, really hits the spot there on my nose. There we go. I'll scrape that more later. But there you go. Oh, and I'm going to take my my lemon zest, add it in here as well. Great, and there you go. Just going to hold it up to the screen. Hopefully you can see that delicious looking bowl here. We have our kale that we massage with olive oil. We've got the quinoa that we cooked a whole big batch of. And then we've got our chickpeas. We've got our red onion. We've got our toasted walnuts. We've got our sliced avocado, which also has a lot of those healthy fats for your brain. You've got your edamame for your plant protein, as well as your roasted tofu, or pan-seared tofu rather. And then we've got some corn and some blueberries. And then we've got our green dressing here to go with our Buddha bowl. So that's about it. It looks so good. I'm gonna leave that here. And so yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to throw them into the chat. This this is literally one of my favorite things to make. And it's so customizable because you can basically just switch out some of the ingredients for other ingredients. You know, if it's summertime, you could add in some roasted zucchini, some bell peppers and tomatoes. You can, for the fall, you can add some carrots and butternut squash, some beets. And yeah, in the springtime, you can totally add some peas, some asparagus, you know, just something to make it really light and refreshing. So, you know, a lot of what we've made today, you know, goes straight towards supporting your brain, your brain health, your heart health, your overall health. So yeah, that's what I've got for today. Oh, actually, I have one more thing that I want to add. I'm just kidding. These are my superfood ingredients that I add to basically all of my salads. It's basically a mix of chia seeds and hemp seeds that I pre-mix. And then I have my ground flax seeds. And I sprinkle these on top of everything because, again, they have those really healthy omega-3 fatty acids that are going to be good for you. So that is something that is kind of like a bonus tip. I just have it all already in jars so that when I buy them in bulk, I can just fill them up and then just sprinkle them over everything because they're just, you know, they're added protein, added omega-3s, and yeah, that's my tip for, you know, boosting up your salad and making sure they've got a whole bunch of superfoods in them. So yeah, if you don't have any questions for me, is there a reason you don't want to mix the ground flax with hemp and chia seeds? Oh, that's a good question. Because sometimes I use them for different things. Like sometimes if I want to soak these instead in some like coconut milk or something, that's going to be like my dessert. Whereas these, I like to grind them fresh as much as possible. So that's why I only put like a little bit. I only have a little bit at a time. So that way, I mean, you could totally mix them all together and save yourself that extra step. But sometimes if I'm adding this to like something that I'm eating that I don't want this in, I have them separate. But like, you know, if I'm making granola or no, not granola, oatmeal, or if I have yogurt, you could totally just mix it all together. But yeah, good question. That's like an even quicker way to get those superfoods into your meals. So yeah, I hope that was, you know, easy and straightforward enough for you to put together. And, you know, a lot of what I did is batch cooked, right? So now I have enough to cook for, you know, lunch tomorrow. I've got enough for breakfast the next day. I've got enough for, you know, dinner tonight. So I'm all about the batch cooking and batch prepping here. Is it true flax seeds? Oh, is it true you don't want to cook flax seeds and just add it to the milk? Yeah, I would say that's definitely true because the flax seeds are high in those omega-3 fats. When you cook them, you can actually, they might break down or they might become, they might break down the fats and so that in a way that it's not actually good for you as much anymore. So you want to keep those raw as much as possible. So the ones that I have, they're just golden flax seeds. And, you know, if I'm going to sprinkle it into something like my oatmeal, which is hot, I'll actually take it off the heat and then I'll add the flax seeds to it because you're right. I don't want to like, you know, physically cook them into something like a soup or, you know, something that's going to destroy the properties of the flax seeds. I don't know if I explained that so well, but yeah, don't cook them. Just add them or sprinkle them onto things. So yeah, I hope that answered your question. Great. So this was so much fun. I loved it. And plus I have dinner ready for me already. So if you've been cooking along, cool. If not, you know, you can always watch the recording after this. So if there weren't any other questions, I just wanted to say thank you all for joining. And I hope you'll jump on our website to make a donation if you haven't already. And, you know, your donations help not just the Alzheimer's Association, but also helps us do these fun cooking classes and cook-alongs with some of our awesome chefs while raising money and raising awareness for these amazing organizations. So yeah, I'll put the link in the chat, but I'll also just drop it into the YouTube replay as well. And yeah, if you want to stay connected, there's always our Facebook group. And again, I just want to say thank you all so much for joining us today. And I hope you'll stay tuned for our next live cooking classes. So thank you all for showing up and donating and being here with us today. It's been a lot of fun and it's great to be here with you. So thank you.